The massive crystalline chamber of the Galactic Council hummed with the voices of 1,000 different species. Ambassador Sarah Chun stood at the human delegation's platform, her dark eyes scanning the tiered amphitheater that had become humanity's second home for the past 50 years. The air recyclers worked overtime to accommodate the breathing requirements of dozens of alien races, creating a constant whisper that had become as familiar as her own heartbeat. Today felt different. The usual diplomatic chatter carried an undercurrent of tension that made Sarah's skin crawl. She'd served as Earth's primary representative for 15 years, and her instincts had never failed her. Something was terribly wrong. The Zephyrian High Chancellor Vextar rose from his elevated position, his translucent blue form shimmering under the chamber's artificial lighting. His species had been among the first to welcome humanity into the galactic community, offering technology and friendship when Earth's first faster-than-light ships had stumbled into their territory. Sarah had always considered the Zephyrians allies, even friends. Honored delegates. Vextar's voice carried through the chamber's universal translation matrix. We gather today to address a matter of grave concern to the stability of our united civilizations. Sarah felt her deputy, Marcus Torres, stiffen beside her. They'd received no advance notice of any special session, no hint of what this emergency gathering might concern. The diplomatic protocols that had governed council proceedings for millennia demanded advance consultation on all matters affecting member species. The species known as Homo sapiens, Vextar continued, his words hitting Sarah like physical blows, has demonstrated patterns of behavior that threaten the very foundation of our peaceful coexistence. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Sarah's hands gripped the rail of her platform, her knuckles white with tension. Around the amphitheater, she could see the representatives of various species turning to look at the human delegation. Some faces showed curiosity, others concern, but a disturbing number displayed what could only be described as anticipation. For 5 decades, we have welcomed these beings into our community, the Zephyrian Chancellor said, his tone growing colder with each word. We have shared our knowledge, our technology, our friendship. In return, humanity has shown us their true nature. Sarah activated her communication panel, requesting permission to speak. The request was denied immediately. A chill ran down her spine as she realized they weren't here as participants in a debate. They were here as the accused in a trial they hadn't known was taking place. The humans call it expansion, Vextar said, his form pulsing with what Sarah had learned was righteous anger among his people. We call it what it truly is, aggressive colonization designed to establish military dominance over peaceful worlds. The accusation was absurd. Humanity's expansion into nearby star systems had been carefully negotiated through proper council channels. Every new colony had been established on worlds deemed suitable for human habitation, with full environmental impact assessments and respect for any existing ecosystems. The process had taken decades of careful planning and coordination. In the past 10 years alone, continued the Chancellor, human colonies have been established on 47 worlds. Military installations have been constructed on 17 of these planets. Weapon manufacturing facilities have been detected on 12 more. Sarah's mind raced. The military installations were defensive in nature, designed to protect the colonies from the raiders and pirates that plagued the Outer Rim territories. The weapons facilities produced tools and equipment for mining operations and planetary defense. Everything had been disclosed in the annual reports submitted to the Council. But, perhaps most disturbing of all, Vextar's voice rose to fill the chamber, is humanity's refusal to share the advanced technologies they have developed in secret. Technologies that could benefit all our peoples, hoarded instead for the exclusive use of their expanding empire. The chamber erupted in voices as dozens of species began talking at once. Sarah caught fragments of conversation through the translation matrix, and what she heard made her blood run cold. The other species weren't surprised by these accusations. They'd been prepared for this moment. A towering Crothery delegate, his chitinous shell gleaming under the lights, stood and pointed a clawed appendage toward the human platform. The humans refused to share their gravitational manipulation technology, he declared in his species' characteristic grating tones. This technology could revolutionize transportation for all our peoples, yet they keep it hidden. Sarah almost laughed at the absurdity. Humanity's gravitational manipulation technology was barely functional, limited to creating artificial gravity fields for their ships and stations. The technology was hardly revolutionary, and the humans had shared the basic principles with any species that requested them. A ethereal luminar representative added her voice to the growing chorus of accusations. Their cybernetic enhancement programs violate the biological integrity protocols established by this very council. They are transforming themselves into something beyond natural evolution. Again, the accusation was based on a fundamental misunderstanding. Humanity's cybernetic research was focused on medical applications, helping paralyzed individuals walk again and restoring sight to the blind. The enhancement programs were voluntary and strictly regulated by Earth's medical authorities. One by one, delegates from dozens of species rose to voice their concerns about humanity's actions. Each accusation was built on half-truths and misinterpretations, but together they painted a picture of a species bent on galactic domination. Sarah realized with growing horror that this wasn't a spontaneous outpouring of concern. This had been orchestrated, planned, rehearsed. Chancellor Vextar raised his hand for silence, and the chamber gradually quieted. "The evidence is overwhelming," he announced. "Humanity represents a clear and present danger to the peace and stability we have worked for millennia to achieve." Sarah finally managed to override the communication lockout, her voice cutting through the chamber's oppressive atmosphere. "These accusations are based on misunderstandings and deliberate misrepresentations," she declared, her words carrying the authority of her years of diplomatic service. "Humanity has acted in accordance with all council protocols and regulations." The Chancellor's form shifted to a deeper blue, a sign of contempt among his people. "Ambassador Chun, your species' pattern of deception and misdirection only confirms our concerns. You speak of protocols while your people prepare for war. We prepare for defense," Sarah shot back. "The Outer Rim territories are plagued by raiders and pirates. Our colonies have been attacked 17 times in the past 5 years alone. We have the right to protect our people." "Rights," scoffed a Serpentine Naga representative, her scales rippling with disdain. "Always you speak of rights. The right to expand, the right to arm yourselves, the right to develop weapons of mass destruction. Where in your philosophy of rights is the responsibility to contribute to the greater good of all species?" Sarah felt the weight of inevitability settling over the chamber. This wasn't a trial or a debate. It was a condemnation that had already been decided. The question now was what form that condemnation would take. Chancellor Vextar's voice filled the chamber once more, carrying with it the weight of official proclamation. "By majority vote of the assembled species, humanity is hereby expelled from the Galactic Council, effective immediately. All trade agreements are suspended, all technological exchanges terminated, all diplomatic immunity revoked." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Expulsion from the Council meant isolation for humanity, cut off from the vast network of trade and cooperation that had allowed human civilization to spread among the stars. Without access to Council shipping lanes and trading posts, human colonies would struggle to survive. Furthermore, the Chancellor continued, "All human presence in Council-protected space is declared unwelcome. Human ships entering Council territory will be treated as hostile vessels and dealt with accordingly." Sarah's mind reeled at the implications. Council-protected space encompassed most of the galaxy's inhabited systems. Humanity would be confined to their current colonies, trapped in a small bubble of space on the galactic rim. "This is madness," she said, her voice carrying across the now silent chamber. 50 years of cooperation, of friendship, thrown away because of fear and misunderstanding. We can resolve these issues through dialogue and negotiation. The Crothery delegate's laughter was like grinding metal. "There is nothing to resolve, human. Your kind has shown its true nature. We simply choose not to ignore it any longer." As the session dissolved into chaos, with delegates streaming toward the exits, Sarah stood frozen at her platform. Around her, the magnificent chamber that had represented hope and cooperation for half a century now felt like a tomb. The dream of humanity taking its place among the stars as equals had just died. But as she watched the alien delegates file out, their faces showing satisfaction rather than regret. Sarah felt something else growing inside her chest. It wasn't despair or fear. It was anger. Cold, calculating anger that reminded her why humanity had survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and every other catastrophe their world had thrown at them. The Galactic Council thought they knew what humans were capable of when threatened. They were about to learn they had no idea what they'd just unleashed. Marcus Torres touched her shoulder gently. "Ambassador, we need to get back to Earth. The colonies need to be warned." Sarah nodded, taking one last look at the crystalline chamber. "Yes," she said quietly. "They need to be warned. All of them. It's time to remind the galaxy who they're dealing with." As they walked toward the exit, Sarah's mind was already racing ahead, planning, calculating, preparing. The Council had just made the biggest mistake in galactic history. They'd given humanity something it had been lacking since joining the galactic community, a common enemy, and a reason to unleash everything they'd been holding back. The age of human diplomacy was over. What came next would reshape the galaxy forever. Admiral Elena Rodriguez stood in the command center of Luna Base, her weathered hands resting on the tactical display that showed the positions of every human ship and installation across 47 star systems. The holographic representation of humanity's presence in the galaxy looked impressive until you considered it in the context of the Council's vast territorial holdings. Humanity controlled less than 2% of inhabited space. The emergency session had been called within hours of Ambassador Chin's return from the Council chambers. Every major military commander, colonial administrator, and government official who could reach Earth or establish secure communication had gathered to hear the news. The silence that followed Chin's report had been deafening. "So they've essentially declared us outlaws," said General Harrison Kim, his scarred face grim under the harsh lighting of the command center. The veteran of the Titan Rebellion had seen humanity through its darkest hour in the solar system, and his presence here spoke to the gravity of the situation. "Worse than outlaws," Chin replied, her diplomatic composure cracking for the first time since her return. "Outlaws can still operate in the shadows, find safe harbors, make allies among those who oppose authority. We've been declared a plague species, something to be contained and eliminated." Admiral Rodriguez studied the tactical display with the eye of someone who'd spent her entire career preparing for the unthinkable. The scenarios had always existed in the deep files of military planning. What if humanity found itself at war with the galaxy? The conclusions had never been encouraging. "Our colonies are scattered across 17 different star systems," she said, her voice cutting through the murmur of conversation that had broken out among the assembled leaders. "Most of them are on the outer rim, far from major shipping lanes and support infrastructure. If the Council enforces this isolation, half our colonies will be struggling within 6 months." President Catherine Morrison stepped forward, her silver hair reflecting the blue light from the displays. She'd been elected on a platform of peaceful expansion and cooperation with alien species. Now she faced the possibility of leading humanity into its first interstellar war. "What about our allies?" she asked. Surely not every species in the Council supported this decision. Chin's expression grew even more grim. The vote was nearly unanimous. Only 3 species abstained, and they made it clear they wouldn't oppose the Council's decision. "We're completely alone." The weight of that statement settled over the room like a burial shroud. For 50 years, humanity had built its expansion strategy around the assumption of continued Council support. Trade agreements provided essential resources that couldn't be produced on most colonial worlds. Technological exchanges had accelerated human development by centuries. Transportation networks had made communication and travel between distant colonies possible. All of that was gone. "There's something else," Chin continued, activating a holographic display that showed recent shipping movements throughout Council space. "Our intelligence assets report massive fleet movements throughout Council territory. They're not just isolating us. They're preparing to enforce that isolation with military force." Admiral Rodriguez felt a cold chill run down her spine as she studied the display. The movements showed a clear pattern. Council fleets were positioning themselves along the borders of human space, creating a blockade that would prevent any human ship from entering Council territory. "How long before they're in position?" she asked. 3 weeks, maybe 4, Chin replied. The Zephyrian Third Fleet is already moving toward the Kepler sector. The Crothery battle groups are establishing patrol routes along the Orion armed trade routes. General Kim slammed his fist on the table, making several people jump. 50 years, he growled. 50 years of playing by their rules, of being the grateful newcomers, of proving we could be trusted. And this is how they repay us. President Morrison raised a hand for calm. What are our options, General? Kim's laugh was harsh and bitter. Options? Madam President, we have exactly two options, surrender or fight. And, if we surrender, they'll scatter our people across the galaxy as indentured servants or worse. Our military capabilities are significant, Admiral Rodriguez said carefully, but we're vastly outnumbered. The Council fleets represent the combined military might of over 1,000 species. Even if we activated every reserve ship and converted every civilian vessel to military use, we'd still be facing odds of at least 50 to 1. The numbers were sobering, but Rodriguez had learned long ago that raw numbers didn't always determine the outcome of conflicts. However, she continued, we do have certain advantages that the Council may not be fully aware of. She activated a new display, this one showing the technical specifications of human military vessels. Our ships are faster than most Council designs. Our weapon systems have greater range and accuracy. Our defensive technologies are more advanced. Most importantly, our crews are trained for conflict in ways that most Council species haven't experienced in centuries. It was true. While the Council species had enjoyed peace and prosperity for generations, humanity had never stopped preparing for war. The Sol System Defense Force had been forged in the fires of civil conflict and resource wars. Every human military officer had studied the great battles of Earth's history, from ancient warfare to the brutal conflicts that had nearly destroyed human civilization before the development of faster-than-light travel. There's another factor to consider, said Dr. Sarah Chong, the head of the Colonial Research Initiative. She'd been quiet throughout the discussion, but now stepped forward with the confidence of someone who'd spent her career pushing the boundaries of human knowledge. They think they know what we're capable of, but they've only seen what we've chosen to show them. Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. Explain. Chong activated a classified display that made several people in the room intake sharply. Project Prometheus. The gravitational weapon research they're so concerned about. The cybernetic enhancement programs. The quantum communication networks. The nanotechnology development. All of it is far more advanced than our public reports indicated. How much more advanced? President Morrison asked. Enough to change the nature of warfare itself, Chong replied. We've been following Council technological development protocols, limiting our research to approved areas and sharing our findings through proper channels. But we've also been conducting parallel research programs that the Council never knew about. It was a revelation that sent shockwaves through the assembled leaders. For decades, humanity had been playing a careful game of technological development, appearing to operate within Council guidelines while secretly pushing far beyond them. The motivation had been simple. No species survived in a galaxy full of predators by depending entirely on the goodwill of others. Admiral Rodriguez felt a grim smile tugging at her lips. Show me the weapon systems. Chang's next display showed technologies that seemed almost magical compared to the equipment currently deployed on human ships. Gravitational weapons that could crush enemy vessels regardless of their shielding. Quantum computers that could predict enemy movements with frightening accuracy. Cybernetic enhancement systems that turned human soldiers into something approaching living weapons. The installations they detected on our colony worlds, Chong continued. They thought they were seeing defensive positions and manufacturing facilities. They were actually looking at the testing grounds for technologies that could reshape galactic civilization. General Kim leaned forward, his eyes bright with possibility. How quickly can we deploy these systems? The manufacturing infrastructure is already in place, Chong replied. We've been building it slowly, carefully, disguised as civilian industrial development. Give me 6 months, and I can outfit every human ship and installation with technology that's centuries ahead of anything the Council has ever seen. President Morrison held up a hand. We're talking about war with virtually the entire galaxy. Even with advanced technology, the casualties would be enormous. Entire colonies could be wiped out. They've already declared war on us, Admiral Rodriguez said quietly. The only question is whether we fight or surrender. And if we surrender, what happens to our colonies? What happens to our children? Do we really think they'll allow humanity to continue existing as anything more than a curiosity or a servant species? The question hung in the air like a death sentence. Everyone in the room knew the answer, even if they didn't want to admit it. The Council's decision hadn't been about containing a threat or preventing conflict. It had been about eliminating competition. There's one more thing, Chang said, her voice barely above a whisper. Project Lazarus. Even Admiral Rodriguez felt her blood run cold at the name. Lazarus was the ultimate contingency plan, the option that no one ever wanted to consider. If humanity faced extinction, if every other option had been exhausted, Lazarus would ensure that their enemies paid a price that would echo through galactic history. President Morrison closed her eyes for a moment, and, when she opened them, they held the weight of a decision that would affect the fate of billions. General Kim, Admiral Rodriguez, I'm placing you in joint command of all human military forces. Dr. Chang, you have unlimited resources and authority to deploy every advanced system we've developed. She paused, looking around the room at the faces of the people who would have to carry out what came next. If the Council wants a war, we'll give them one they'll never forget. But we'll do it our way, on our terms, and we'll make sure they understand exactly what they've awakened. As the meeting dissolved into urgent planning sessions and rapid deployment orders, Admiral Rodriguez found herself studying the tactical display once more. The Council fleets were massive, their technology proven over millennia of warfare. But they'd grown complacent during centuries of peace, comfortable in their superiority over the younger species. They'd forgotten the fundamental truth that had driven human expansion across Earth's continents and into the depths of space. A cornered animal was always the most dangerous. And humanity had just been backed into the ultimate corner. The galaxy was about to learn why Earth's predators had evolved to survive by any means necessary. In the depths of Luna Base, automated systems began awakening technologies that had slumbered in darkness for decades. Manufacturing facilities disguised as civilian installations started producing weapons that would have horrified the Council if they'd known of their existence. And in the Outer Rim colonies, ordinary human settlers began preparing for a war that would determine whether their species had a future among the stars. The Council had betrayed humanity's trust and friendship. Soon, they would discover that humanity's capacity for vengeance was far more terrible than anything they'd imagined possible. Captain Maria Santos watched the Zephyrian fleet through the tactical display of the U.S. Retribution, her eyes tracking the elegant blue ships as they moved into blockade formation around the Kepler 442 system. 3 weeks had passed since the Council's ultimatum, and the alien fleets were finally in position to enforce humanity's isolation. What they didn't know was that they were walking into the most carefully planned ambush in galactic history. 27 ships, reported Lieutenant Commander Jackson from the sensor station. 3 heavy cruisers, 8 destroyers, 16 escort frigates. They're maintaining standard Council formation protocols. Santos nodded grimly. The Zephyrian Third Fleet was one of the Council's most experienced combat units, veterans of dozens of peacekeeping operations across the galaxy. They'd been chosen for this mission because of their reputation for precision and restraint. The Council wanted humanity contained, not massacred. They still believed this was about law enforcement rather than war. Status of the other task forces? Santos asked. Ghost Squadron is in position at the Gliese system, Jackson reported. Phantom Wing has the Crothry battle group in the Wolf sector locked on sensors. Wraith Division is shadowing the Naga fleet near Proxima. All units report ready for simultaneous engagement. The plan was ambitious beyond anything humanity had ever attempted. Rather than fighting a defensive war from their scattered colonies, they would strike first, targeting the Council fleets before they could fully establish their blockade. It was a strategy that went against everything the Council expected from the peaceful, law-abiding humans they thought they knew. Admiral Rodriguez's voice crackled through the communication system from her flagship, the U.S. Defiance. All units, this is Overlord. Phase 1 is authorized. Remember, we're not just fighting for our colonies. We're fighting for our right to exist as a free species. Make every shot count. Santos felt the familiar tightness in her chest that came before combat. Helm, take us out of stealth mode. All hands, battle stations. The retribution shimmered into visibility like a nightmare materializing from deep space. Around her, 11 other human warships appeared from the darkness, their hulls gleaming with the matte black coating that had hidden them from Council sensors. The stealth technology was another gift from the secret research programs, allowing human ships to approach within weapons range before revealing themselves. Alarms began screaming throughout the Zephyrian formation as their sensors detected the human fleet. Santos watched with grim satisfaction as the elegant blue ships began scrambling to respond to a threat that had appeared in what they'd thought was empty space. Target the heavy cruiser, Transcendent Glory, Santos ordered. All ships, engage at will. The space around Kepler 442 erupted in fire and energy as human weapons systems unleashed hell upon the Zephyrian fleet. The gravitational cannons that the Council had been so worried about proved their worth immediately, twisting space-time itself to crush enemy hulls regardless of their shielding. Energy beams that could cut through neutronium plating carved through Zephyrian armor like it was tissue paper. The lead heavy cruiser staggered under the assault, her elegant lines marred by explosions that vented atmosphere and debris into the void. The ship's captain, Commander Yellstar, had faced pirates and raiders in dozens of engagements, but nothing had prepared him for the raw, destructive power of human military technology. "Return fire," he ordered, his voice steady despite the chaos erupting around his ship. "All units, engage the human vessels." The Zephyrian response was swift and professional, their weapons systems targeting the human ships with precision guided by centuries of military experience. But their weapons, designed for peacekeeping operations against lightly armed opponents, barely scratched the advanced armor and shielding systems protecting the human fleet. Santos watched her tactical display with growing amazement as enemy fire splashed harmlessly off the Retribution's defensive systems. The quantum shielding technology absorbed energy weapons and dissipated their force across multiple dimensional layers. Physical projectiles simply passed through the quantum barriers without making contact with the ship's hull. "Their weapons are having no effect," Jackson reported, his voice filled with disbelief. "Shields are holding at 97% capacity." It was a technological mismatch of epic proportions. While the Council had spent centuries refining their weapons for use against opponents with similar technology, humanity had been developing systems specifically designed to face superior numbers. Every human ship was built to survive encounters that would destroy dozens of enemy vessels. The battle became a slaughter. One by one, the Zephyrian ships fell to human firepower, their hulls torn apart by weapons that manipulated the fundamental forces of the universe. The proud Third Fleet, veterans of countless peacekeeping missions, was being systematically annihilated by an enemy they'd underestimated beyond all reason. Commander Yellstar watched his fleet dying around him and made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "All units, fall back to minimum safe distance. Transmit surrender signal." The transmission reached Santos moments later, the alien commander's voice heavy with defeat and confusion. "Human ships, this is Zephyrian Fleet Command. We request immediate ceasefire and negotiation." Santos looked at her tactical display, showing the broken remains of the enemy fleet scattered across the system. 15 ships destroyed, 9 more crippled, and drifting, only 3 vessels still capable of independent movement. The entire engagement had lasted less than 20 minutes. "Negative, Zephyrian Command," she replied, her voice carrying across the void like a death sentence. "You came here to enforce our isolation. You came here to trap us like animals. There will be no negotiation, no surrender, no mercy. You wanted to see what humans are capable of when threatened. Now you know." The gravitational cannons fired again, and the last 3 Zephyrian ships vanished in brief stars of nuclear fire. Across human space, similar scenes were playing out as the other task forces engaged their targets. Ghost Squadron had caught the Crothery battle group completely off guard, using quantum tunneling torpedoes to bypass enemy shields and detonate their warheads inside enemy ships. Phantom Wing was systematically dismantling the Naga fleet with weapons that phased in and out of normal space-time. Wraith Division had turned the area around Proxima into a graveyard of burning alien vessels. The reports flooded into Admiral Rodriguez's command center aboard the Defiance, each one bringing news of overwhelming human victory. The careful, professional tone of her ship commanders couldn't hide their amazement at the effectiveness of their new weapons systems. All primary targets eliminated, reported Captain Walsh from Ghost Squadron. No human casualties. Minimal damage to our vessels. Phantom Wing reporting complete success, came another voice. Enemy fleet destroyed. We're moving to Phase 2 objectives. Rodriguez studied the tactical display showing the entire theater of operations. In less than an hour, humanity had destroyed or crippled for major Council fleets without losing a single ship. The message this would send throughout the galaxy would be impossible to ignore. But she knew this was only the beginning. The Council commanded thousands of ships, millions of trained soldiers, the industrial output of 1,000 worlds. What humanity had accomplished today was impressive, but it wouldn't be enough to win the war that was coming. All units, this is Overlord. She broadcast to the scattered human fleets. Phase 1 complete. Proceed to Phase 2 objectives. Remember, we're not just fighting to survive. We're fighting to prove that humanity belongs among the stars, whether the Council likes it or not. Phase 2 would take the war directly to Council space, targeting their supply lines, communication networks, and industrial facilities. It would be a campaign designed to cripple their ability to wage war while demonstrating that human space was no longer the isolated frontier they'd tried to create. As her ships began moving toward their next objectives, Rodriguez allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The Council had thought they were dealing with a primitive species that could be easily contained. They'd been wrong about human technology, wrong about human capabilities, and catastrophically wrong about human determination. But the expression on her face was grim rather than triumphant. What humanity had unleashed today would reshape the galaxy forever. The age of peace and cooperation that had lasted for millennia was ending, replaced by a conflict that would test every species will to survive. In the depths of space, automated distress beacons from the destroyed Council fleets continued broadcasting their final messages, carrying news of humanity's first strike to every corner of the galaxy. The message was simple and terrifying. The humans were no longer hiding their true capabilities. The war for humanity's survival had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same. On Earth, in the underground command bunkers that had been prepared for this day, military analysts were already studying the engagement data and planning the next phase of operations. The successful deployment of humanity's secret weapons had exceeded even the most optimistic projections. Dr. Chang reviewed the combat reports with a mixture of pride and horror. The technologies her teams had developed in secret were performing exactly as designed, giving human forces an overwhelming advantage over enemies who had never faced anything like them. But she also knew that this advantage was temporary. The Council would adapt, develop countermeasures, find ways to neutralize humanity's technological edge. The next phase of the war would be very different from this opening strike. Still, for now, humanity had achieved something remarkable. For the first time since joining the galactic community, they'd proven that they were nobody's victims. The species that had conquered their own world through determination and ingenuity was ready to fight for their place among the stars. The Council had awakened a sleeping giant. Now they would face the consequences of that decision. High Chancellor Vextar stared at the holographic display showing the remains of 4 Council fleets, his translucent form flickering with patterns of rage and disbelief. The crystalline chamber of the Galactic Council had been transformed into a war room, with tactical displays replacing the elegant artwork that had once adorned its walls. The age of peace was over. Impossible, whispered the Crothery delegate, his chitinous claws clicking nervously against the surface of his platform. 27 ships destroyed in less than 20 minutes. How could primitives accomplish such a feat? Vextar's anger pulsed brighter as he studied the sensor readings from the doomed fleets. The weapon signatures were unlike anything in the Council's databases. Gravitational distortions that crushed matter at the molecular level. Energy beams that phased through conventional shielding. Projectiles that appeared to tunnel through space-time itself. They have been lying to us, he said, his voice carrying the chill of absolute zero. For 50 years, they have been building weapons while pretending to seek peaceful cooperation. Every technology sharing agreement, every diplomatic exchange, every gesture of friendship has been a calculated deception. The chamber filled with the voices of hundreds of species, each one demanding answers, explanations, revenge. The Naga representative's scales rippled with fury as she described the total destruction of her people's third battle group. The Luminar delegate's ethereal form blazed with indignation as he recounted the systematic annihilation of ships that had served the Council for centuries. But it was the silence from the outer rim that truly worried Vextar. 3 days had passed since the human attacks, and communication with dozens of Council installations and colonies had been severed. Long-range sensors showed the telltale signatures of human ships moving through Council space like phantoms, striking at targets with surgical precision before vanishing back into the darkness. Report from the Vega sector, announced a Centauran aide, her forearms trembling as she accessed the latest intelligence data. The mining station at Vega 7 has gone silent. Automated distress signals indicate massive structural damage and total life support failure. Another voice from across the chamber, industrial complex at Rigel. 4 reports coordinated attacks on power generation facilities and communications arrays. No direct contact with the attackers, but weapon signatures matched the Kepler incident. The reports continued to flow in, each one painting a picture of a campaign designed not just to inflict damage, but to send a message. The humans weren't simply defending themselves. They were systematically dismantling the Council's infrastructure, targeting the economic and industrial foundations that kept galactic civilization functioning. They're trying to cripple our ability to wage war, observed General Thakmore, the Council's supreme military commander. The ancient Corvani warrior had led peacekeeping forces for over 2 centuries, but nothing in his experience had prepared him for this kind of conflict. Every target has been chosen to maximize economic damage while minimizing civilian casualties. It was true, and somehow that made the attacks even more terrifying. A mindless rage could be countered with superior force and tactical brilliance. But this was something else entirely. A coldly calculated campaign that demonstrated intimate knowledge of Council military doctrine and infrastructure. How are they moving through our space undetected? Vextar demanded. Our sensor networks span millions of star systems. Nothing should be able to avoid detection on this scale. The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Yalera, the Council's chief technology advisor, had remained silent throughout the emergency session, but now stepped forward with data that made the entire chamber fall silent. They're using quantum tunneling technology, she announced, her insectoid features clicking with what her species displayed as professional admiration mixed with terror. Their ships can phase in and out of normal space-time, appearing anywhere within a radius of several hundred light-years without using conventional faster-than-light travel. The implications hit the assembled delegates like a physical blow. If human ships could appear anywhere without warning, then nowhere in Council space was safe. The vast distances that had always protected the galactic core worlds from external threats had become meaningless. Furthermore, Dr. Yalera continued, analysis of the weapon signatures suggests technology that's centuries ahead of our current capabilities. Gravitational manipulation on this scale requires computing power and energy generation that should be impossible for a species of their technological level. General Thakmore's scarred face grew even more grim. They've been preparing for this war for decades, maybe longer. While we thought they were learning from us, they were actually studying us, analyzing our weaknesses, developing countermeasures to everything we consider militarily significant. The realization sent a chill through the chamber. Humanity hadn't stumbled into galactic civilization as grateful newcomers seeking guidance and protection. They'd entered as infiltrators, gathering intelligence while building the weapons that would make them the most dangerous species in known space. What are our options? Vextar asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. General Thakmore activated a display showing the current disposition of Council forces throughout the galaxy. We can mobilize approximately 1,500 heavy combat vessels within 6 months. Additional support ships and defensive installations could bring the total to over 3,000 vessels. The numbers should have been overwhelming. Even the most optimistic estimates put human military strength at fewer than 200 ships. But everyone in the chamber had seen the battle reports from Kepler. Human weapons technology gave them a force multiplication factor that made conventional calculations meaningless. "There is another option," said a voice from the shadows near the chamber's entrance. The delegates turned to see a figure in the dark robes of the Void Walkers, the mysterious species that served as the Council's intelligence operatives and deep space scouts. The Void Walker moved forward with the fluid grace of a predator, its features hidden beneath layers of concealment technology that made it appear as little more than a moving shadow. The humans have colonies scattered across 17 star systems. Their industrial base depends on mining operations and manufacturing facilities that are largely undefended. Vextar felt a cold certainty settle over him as he understood what the Void Walker was suggesting. "You're proposing we target their civilian populations." "I'm proposing we use the same strategy they're employing against us," the Shadow replied. "Strike at their industrial and economic infrastructure. Force them to divert their military assets to defensive operations. Make them choose between protecting their colonies and continuing their attacks on our territory." The suggestion hung in the air like a death sentence. For over a millennium, the Council had maintained strict protocols against targeting civilian populations. It was one of the fundamental principles that separated galactic civilization from the barbarism of the pre-Council era. But the humans had already shattered so many of those principles. Their sneak attacks violated every treaty and protocol governing warfare between civilized species. Their weapons violated biological integrity guidelines that had been established to prevent exactly this kind of technological arms race. "If we target their colonies," said the Naga representative slowly, "we become no better than the raiders and pirates we've spent centuries eliminating." "If we don't target their colonies," General Thakmore replied grimly, "we may not survive long enough for moral distinctions to matter." The debate that followed was unlike anything the Council chamber had ever witnessed. Species that had cooperated for millennia found themselves arguing for tactics that would have been unthinkable just days earlier. The elegant philosophical discussions that had once characterized Council deliberations gave way to desperate calculations of survival and revenge. In the end, it was Vextar who called for the vote that would reshape galactic warfare forever. All in favor of authorizing military action against human colonial infrastructure? The vote was closer than anyone had expected, but the result was inevitable. Faced with an enemy that had already proven capable of destroying their fleets with impunity, the Council chose to abandon the principles that had guided them for over 1,000 years. As the session dissolved into urgent planning for retaliatory strikes, reports continued to flow in from across Council space. Human ships had appeared near major shipping routes, destroying cargo vessels and supply convoys with weapons that left no debris for analysis. Communication relays had been systematically targeted, creating dead zones where Council forces couldn't coordinate their responses. The war that the Council had started with expulsion orders and blockades had become something far more terrible. In trying to contain humanity, they had unleashed a species that fought with the desperate fury of a cornered predator and the technological sophistication of a civilization that had never stopped preparing for war. But perhaps most terrifying of all was the realization that this was only the beginning. The human attacks had been surgical, precise, designed to cripple rather than destroy. If they were capable of this level of devastation while still showing restraint, what would happen when that restraint was finally abandoned? In the depths of space, automated manufacturing facilities that had been disguised as human mining operations began producing weapons that would make the Council's decision to target civilian populations the most catastrophic mistake in galactic history. The humans had been holding back, fighting with conventional weapons and limited objectives. That was about to change. Dr. Chang's voice echoed through secure communication channels to every human military commander in the galaxy. "The Council has voted to target our colonies. All previous restrictions are hereby lifted. Deploy Omega-level weapons systems. Authorization code, Prometheus Unbound." Across human space, ships that had been running silent and dark began powering up weapon systems that had never been tested in combat. The technology that humanity had kept hidden even from their own forces was about to be unveiled. The Council thought they were fighting a war. They were about to discover they'd been facing a species that had redefined what war could be. The mining colony on Kepler 438b had been humanity's first foothold in the galaxy beyond Earth, a small settlement of 10,000 pioneers who had spent 3 generations turning a barren world into something approaching home. Maria Castellanos had been born there, raised among the red rock formations and artificial atmospheric processors that made the planet habitable. Now she stood in the colony's command center, watching enemy ships approach with the cold certainty of someone who knew she was about to die. The Council fleet emerging from faster-than-light travel was massive beyond anything she'd ever seen. 60 ships ranging from massive dreadnoughts to swift escort frigates, their hulls gleaming with the colors of a dozen different species united in their determination to make humanity pay for its defiance. All civilian transports have been evacuated, reported her deputy, Thomas Chun, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. Last ship cleared the gravity well 20 minutes ago. Maria nodded, her gaze fixed on the tactical display. The evacuation had been efficient, but incomplete. 3 million colonists scattered across 17 worlds couldn't all be moved in a matter of days. The Council knew this, counted on it, planned their attack to inflict maximum psychological damage on the human war effort. They had no idea what they just triggered. Incoming transmission from the lead Council vessel, Thomas announced. The holographic display shimmered to life, revealing the imposing figure of Admiral Korthax, the Crothry military leader whose reputation for ruthless efficiency had made him a legend throughout Council space. His chitinous features showed no emotion as he delivered what he clearly expected to be humanity's death sentence. Human colonists, you will surrender immediately and submit to Council authority. Your species has violated every principle of galactic civilization, and the time for mercy has ended. Comply, or face complete extermination. Maria felt a cold smile tugging at her lips. Admiral, this is Colonial Administrator Castellanos. I have a message for you and the Council that sent you here. She activated a quantum communication array that should have been impossible for a remote mining colony to possess. The signal reached every human ship and installation across known space, as well as monitoring stations throughout Council territory. Her next words would be heard by billions of beings across the galaxy. You came here thinking we were helpless civilians, easy targets that would break human morale and force us to surrender. You were wrong about us in every possible way. We're not victims. We're the bait. Admiral Korthax felt the first stirrings of unease as his sensor operators began reporting anomalies throughout the system. Energy signatures were appearing on passive sensors, weapons systems were powering up, and the empty space around the human colony was revealing itself to be anything but empty. Impossible, he muttered, his claws clicking against his command chair. Our scouts reported minimal defensive installations. The space around Kepler 438b erupted in fire as concealed weapon platforms that had been built into asteroids, moons, and apparently empty space revealed themselves. These weren't the defensive installations the Council had detected in their intelligence gathering. These were something else entirely, weapons that defied every principle of physics that the galaxy's scientists thought they understood. The lead Council dreadnought staggered as gravitational fields orders of magnitude more powerful than anything previously seen began tearing at its hull. The ship's proud armor, designed to withstand the firepower of entire fleets, crumpled like tissue paper under forces that compressed matter into neutronium and, then, released it in catastrophic explosions. All ships, evasive maneuvers, Korthax ordered, his voice cutting through the chaos erupting around his fleet. Return fire on all human positions. The Council fleet's response was swift and professional, their weapons targeting the revealed human installations with the combined firepower of 60 vessels. Energy beams that could vaporize mountains struck the weapon platforms, only to watch in horror as the attacks were absorbed and redirected back at their own ships. Admiral, his tactical officer's voice was tight with disbelief. Our weapons are having no effect. The humans appear to be using some form of energy redistribution technology. It was worse than that. The human weapons weren't just defensive, they were learning, adapting to each new type of energy directed at them, and finding ways to incorporate that power into their own attacks. Every shot fired by the Council fleet made the human weapon stronger. Across the system, more human ships began decloaking, but these weren't the vessels the Council had faced in previous engagements. These ships were larger, their hulls rippling with energy fields that seemed to bend light around them. As they moved into attack formation, space itself seemed to twist and distort in their wake. Admiral Rodriguez's voice cut through the communication channels from her flagship, now revealed as something far more advanced than any ship in the Council's databases. Council fleet, you are now facing humanity's true military capability. You wanted to see what we do to those who threaten our people. Pay attention. The human counterattack began with weapons that shouldn't have existed. Temporal distortion cannons that aged enemy ships centuries and seconds, causing their hulls to decay and collapse under the weight of accelerated time. Quantum decoherence beams that caused matter to lose its fundamental cohesion, turning solid metal into clouds of constituent atoms. But it was the deployment of the Prometheus weapons that truly demonstrated the gulf between human and Council technology. These devices didn't just destroy enemy ships. They violated the basic laws of physics that governed the universe, creating localized regions where the fundamental constants of reality could be manipulated at will. Admiral Korthax watched in horrified fascination as one of his heavy cruisers simply ceased to exist, not destroyed or vaporized, but edited out of reality as if it had never been built. Another vessel aged backwards until it became the raw materials from which it had been constructed, its crew experiencing their lives in reverse before dissolving into component elements. "What have they become?" he whispered, his tactical training failing him in the face of weapons that transcended everything he'd thought he understood about warfare. The answer came from unexpected source. Dr. Chang's voice cut through the chaos, broadcasting from a human research facility that materialized from stealth mode near the edge of the system. "We became what we needed to become to survive in a galaxy that wanted to see us extinct. You thought you were fighting humans. You're fighting the next stage of evolution itself." It was the truth that the Council had been too arrogant to see. While they'd spent centuries maintaining the status quo, refining existing technologies, and preserving established power structures, humanity had been pushing the boundaries of what was possible. Every interaction with Council species had been an opportunity to learn, to adapt, to evolve beyond the limitations that kept other species trapped in technological and philosophical stagnation. The battle became a massacre unlike anything in galactic history. One by one, Council ships fell to weapons that violated every principle of military science. Some were destroyed by gravitational forces that compressed them into singularities. Others were torn apart by energy fields that separated their molecules while keeping their crews conscious long enough to experience their own dissolution. When Admiral Korthax's flagship finally succumbed to a weapon that turned its armor into a virulent plague that consumed the ship from within, only 12 vessels remained from his original fleet of 60. His final transmission was a broken whisper that carried across the galaxy. "We have awakened something that should not exist." But the demonstration at Kepler 438b was only the beginning. Across Council space, human ships emerged from hiding to begin a campaign of systematic destruction that would reshape the galaxy forever. The careful restraint that had characterized their earlier attacks was gone, replaced by weapons that treated the laws of physics as mere suggestions to be ignored when convenient. On Earth, President Morrison stood before the emergency session of the Human Colonial Council, her face grim with the weight of decisions that would echo through history. The Council forced this escalation by targeting our civilians. They wanted to see what humanity would do when pushed beyond all limits. Now they know. The reports flowing in from across known space painted a picture of destruction so complete that it defied comprehension. Entire Council fleets had been eliminated not by superior numbers or tactics, but by weapons that operated outside the normal parameters of reality. Industrial complexes that had taken centuries to build were being reduced to their component atoms in minutes. "Are we still human?" asked General Kim, his scarred face reflecting the weight of what their species had become. Dr. Chang answered from her position at the scientific advisory panel. We're what humanity becomes when it's forced to evolve or die. The Council wanted to see us contained, controlled, reduced to the status of a minor species begging for scraps from their table. Instead, they've created something that transcends every limitation they thought governed intelligent life. As the session continued, reports of human victory continued to arrive from every corner of the galaxy. But these weren't victories in any conventional sense. They were demonstrations of technological superiority so absolute that the very concept of warfare was becoming obsolete. The greatest achievement of galactic civilization, the council that had maintained peace and cooperation for over a millennium, was dissolving in the face of a species that had learned to manipulate reality itself. The age of cooperation was ending, replaced by an era where humanity's survival had forced them to become something beyond the comprehension of any other known species. In the depths of space, the last Council fleets were making their final stands against human forces that no longer seemed bound by the physical laws that governed the rest of the universe. The galaxy had wanted to see humanity contained. Instead, they had created gods. The war was over in all but name. What remained was for the galaxy to learn what kind of gods humanity would choose to become, and whether any vestige of their original nature would survive the transformation they had been forced to undergo. The Council's betrayal had achieved something beyond their worst nightmares. It had forced humanity to evolve into something that could reshape reality itself. The question now was whether the galaxy would survive what it had created.